A silent orchid. A missing scientist. A lie buried in stone. Welcome to Sayers and Secrets. I am your host Samuel Drake. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love hearing where Wolfe's cases are being followed. Thanks for making time for sharp minds and sharper mysteries. Now the case begins. If you've ever lived in New York long enough, you know there are three kinds of knocks. There's the polite knock, which means someone's here to sell you something you don't want. There's the impatient knock, which means someone wants something they're not supposed to ask for. And then there's the knock that's too soft, too even, and carries with it the faint echo of calculation. That last one came to the brownstone at exactly 10:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was in the front room, flipping through an illustrated edition of The Complete Martyrdom of Diet, which Wolfe had received as a joke from a disgruntled former chef. He hadn't laughed. He had, however, let me keep it. So when that knock came, two crisp taps spaced like a semicolon, I knew we weren't getting a delivery. Fritz was in the kitchen orchestrating veal, so I played doorman. She was tall, not statuesque. There's a difference. She did not glide, she did not smirk, and she certainly did not appear lost. She wore a navy wool coat that might have cost more than my car, and her eyes were a shade you usually only see in paintings, cold grey, like steel under frost. "Archie Goodwin?" she asked. "That's what it says on the mailbox." She opened her handbag, pulled out a slim envelope, and handed it over without a word. Then she turned on her heel and walked down the steps. No hesitation, no small talk. I weighed the envelope in my palm. Thin, hand-addressed, cream paper, no stamp. Just Mr. Nero Wolfe Private, immediate. From CSCs meant nothing to me. I shut the door, locked it, and walked it to Wolfe, who was predictably seated at his desk in the office, mid-paragraph in Poggy's Orchids of Madagascar. He didn't look up when I entered. "A letter," I said, "hand-delivered, from someone who didn't want to stay for tea." He looked up, sighed, and extended a hand. I handed it over. He opened it with the ivory-handled paper knife, the one that never actually cuts anything, but gives him the illusion of civility. He read the note once, then again. Then he set it down like it was made of glass. I picked it up and read over his shoulder. "Mr. Wolfe, there is something beneath the conservatory steps. I dare not explain more in writing. I am being watched. I will be in contact. Please say nothing, especially not to my brother. C.S." I raised an eyebrow. Cryptics in style again. Wolfe didn't respond. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "The conservatory steps," he said. "They refer to our conservatory. Here." "You mean our conservatory steps," I said. "As in the ones that haven't seen anything but orchid dirt and Fritz's shoe prints for years?" Wolfe nodded once. "And the initials?" "CS," he said. "You recall Caroline Safford?" I paused. "Oh," I said. "Caroline Safford." I hadn't heard the name in years, but it stirred up a file in my memory cabinet. Society girl. Museum trustee. Family money so old it probably had a trust fund in a Latin translation. About 5 years back, she came to Wolfe to vet a potential fiancé, one Gregory Morrow, who turned out to be exactly as oily as Wolfe had guessed. Caroline had thanked Wolfe with a basket of hard-to-find spices and a handwritten note of eternal gratitude. Nothing since. "Her brother," I said. "That'd be Clifton Safford. Wall Street prince, right? Some kind of real estate magnate." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Reclusive, rarely photographed, and known to be possessive of the family name." I moved to the hallway, then out through the kitchen, past Fritz, who blinked but said nothing, and into the conservatory. I took the stone steps 2 at a time, and knelt down. Fritz had cleaned this morning, so everything was tidy, nothing out of place. But when I got to the 3rd step, I saw it. A slip of paper, curled slightly at the corner, barely visible behind the edge of the stone. I fished it out. It was a photograph. Small, black and white, and aged not from years, but from handling. Folded once, now opened. The image was simple but strange. A man I didn't recognize walking through what looked like an industrial greenhouse. He wore a long coat and carried a leather briefcase. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a handwritten number 21. I brought it back to Wolfe, who took it without comment and studied it with a jeweler's patience. Unknown location, he murmured. Possibly Long Island. Industrial hothouse. That coat suggests early spring. The briefcase, ordinary. But the number, that's a label, possibly a sequence. You think there are more? Yes, Wolfe said. He didn't say anything else, but I knew that look. He was already building the latticework. After a minute, I said, "So what do we do? Sit here waiting for another note to show up under the begonias?" "No," he said. "We inquire discreetly. Call Long Cohen. Ask him if Clifton Safford has been mentioned in the business pages recently. Then check police blotters for industrial theft, vandalism, or surveillance tied to hothouse facilities. Because Caroline Safford has risked her safety and mine to warn us. Something is hidden beneath a civil exterior, something illicit, and she fears her brother." Which tells us what? Wolfe leaned back, that the crime, Archie, is not beneath the steps. It is beneath the surface of their lives. And just like that, the brownstone had been cracked open again. Not by violence, not by a cry for help, but by a quiet note, a stranger's face, and a woman who had once said thank you, and now said nothing at all. We were in it, whether Wolfe liked it or not, and something told me he did. In the normal run of things, our front door stays shut to the world, unless a client brings trouble through it, or Fritz opens it to receive imported cheese. But by mid-morning Wednesday, our perfectly calibrated domestic serenity had been officially compromised by the Safford family, without so much as a scheduled appointment. Wolfe was in the plant rooms giving the Cymbidiums their monthly lecture on survival when the phone rang. I picked it up, assuming it was Long Cohen calling back with whatever he'd dug up from the Gazette archives. It wasn't. "This is Clifton Safford," the voice said. "I'd like to speak to Mr. Wolfe, immediately." The voice had that tight, polished impatience of a man used to being obeyed, or pretending he didn't care when he wasn't. I didn't blink. "He's unavailable at the moment," I said. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "I received a message this morning. A photograph in a plain envelope. No return address. No explanation. Just the number 21 written in the corner. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Mr. Goodwin?" That got my full attention. "I might," I said. "Are you at home?" "I am. But I'm not discussing this over the phone. Neither are we. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Wolfe didn't emerge when I told him who had called, but he did stop what he was doing, which for him is basically a backflip. Clifton Safford received the same photo. "Apparently," I said, "and he's upset." "He would be," Wolfe muttered. "He has no practice in being unsettled. Want me to poke the hornet's nest?" "Yes, carefully." 25 minutes later, I was standing outside the Safford townhouse on East 73rd, which had all the charm of a private museum and the warmth of an ice bucket. I was greeted by a man who introduced himself as Langley, thin, silver-haired, and probably capable of dismembering an intruder with a serving tray. He led me into a dark paneled sitting room with enough antique clocks to make a watchmaker twitch. Clifton Safford was standing at the fireplace, holding the photograph like it had personally offended him. He was taller than his sister, broader across the shoulders, and dressed in grey wool that probably came with its own valet. His hair was going silver at the temples, but his eyes were sharp and inquisitive. When he saw me, he didn't bother shaking hands. "I was told you might have context for this." I took the photo from him and confirmed it was the same one we'd found under the conservatory steps. Same man, same setting, same numbered corner. Where did it come from? I asked. My morning mail. No postmark. Hand-delivered sometime last night or early this morning. Just the photo. Just the photo. But someone wanted me to find it. They knew I'd recognize the setting. I waited. He exhaled. It was taken at the Green Vale Institute, one of my company's subsidiary holdings, a biotech research greenhouse technically. We fund them through a shell group. It's not public. That's what makes this troubling. Troubling how? Because that man, he said, tapping the photo, doesn't belong there. His name is Victor Lanham. He used to work for one of our private security vendors. He was dismissed 2 years ago after an internal review. Why? There was an incident involving encrypted materials being removed from a restricted lab. No charges filed, but we severed ties immediately. And now he's back, I said. Safford nodded grimly. Not only back, but inside a facility that should be sealed. That photo was taken from one of the internal greenhouse corridors. Someone let him in, or he never left. Or I said, he was never really out. He didn't like that. Are you saying this is a setup? I'm saying someone's playing a layered game, and the moment you found that photo, you became a player whether you wanted to or not. He rubbed a hand across his chin, clearly agitated now. Have you spoken to my sister? I kept my face neutral. Why would I? She's difficult, always has been, idealistic, suspicious of power. She doesn't understand the complexities of what we do. You mean money? I mean legacy, responsibility. There are investments, partnerships, interests that must be protected. And Lanham threatened those. Lanham got too curious. He believed the Institute was a cover for something larger. That's when he crossed a line, and Caroline believed him. Safford flinched slightly. She always saw conspiracies. She distrusts everyone, including me. I pocketed the photo, and stood. I'll pass this along to Mr. Wolfe. He may have follow-up questions. Will you tell him I want this handled quietly? You just did. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had returned to the office, and was already at his desk when I walked in. I handed him the photo from Safford, and gave him the recap. Wolfe listened with his eyes closed, and his fingers steepled. When I was done, he opened his eyes. The Green Vale Institute, he said. I've seen the name in passing. Very low public profile. They're buried inside one of Safford's holding companies. Caroline may have access, or at least knowledge of it. And now she's sending photos that lead us straight into her brother's closet. Which tells us what? That whatever she's trying to reveal, it's tied to something he buried. Probably something dirty, possibly, Wolfe said. Or perhaps something he cannot admit, even to himself. That sounded like a philosophical point. But Wolfe wasn't done. Call Saul. Have him trace Lanham. Employment records, legal filings, anything connecting him to the Institute after his supposed dismissal. Also inquire about Caroline Safford's recent activities, especially property visits, travel, and any attempts to access her brother's financial records. What are we looking for? A bridge, Wolfe said, between a photograph, a missing man, and a sister with access to the conservatory, and the steps. They are only the beginning. That night, I waited to see if Caroline would make another move. No knock came, no note, just the silence of the brownstone, and the slow, almost inaudible gears of Wolfe's mind turning in the dark. Something was unfolding, carefully, deliberately, and it wasn't finished with us yet. By the time Thursday morning rolled around, the brownstone had settled into that rare, uneasy hum that means something under the surface is coiling tighter. Wolfe wasn't pacing, he doesn't, but the subtle signs were there. He refused Fritz's first offering of breakfast. He reread a monograph on medicinal orchids without turning a page. And he didn't speak to me until I was halfway through a second cup of coffee. Saul will report this morning, he said. It wasn't a question. He's already on his way. I replied. Called just after 7. Said he had something you'll want both ears for. Wolfe gave a grunt that might have meant satisfaction, or heartburn. With him, it's a fine line. The bell rang at 9:04. Saul Panzer doesn't waste minutes. I opened the door to find him in a trim charcoal suit, and that face that looks like it's never been surprised by anything since 1983. He stepped inside without a word, handed me a folder, and headed straight for Wolfe's office. I followed him in, and took my seat on the red chair across from the desk. Wolfe looked up and nodded once. Well, Saul sat, opened the folder, and began. Victor Lanham didn't vanish. Not exactly. He was reassigned. Wolfe's eyebrow arched just slightly. After his so-called dismissal, Saul continued. He was moved to a private security consultancy registered in Delaware, which only ever had one contract, an environmental logistics firm based in Long Island. That firm leases its headquarters from a Safford shell company and shares a wall with the Green Veil Institute. Wolfe grunted. That's not all, Saul said. Lanham's last known address was a short-term lease under a fake name in Hempstead, 15 minutes from the institute. And 2 months ago, a police report was filed, anonymously, alleging unauthorized nighttime activity at the Green Veil facility. Nothing came of it. No one pressed charges, but 3 days later, Lanham's lease was terminated, and his trail goes cold. Covered, I said. Effaced, Wolfe corrected. Saul nodded. Also Caroline Safford visited the Green Veil property under a different name. 3 weeks ago, she used an access code linked to a maintenance contractor. She was there for less than 15 minutes. She was looking for something, Wolfe murmured, or someone, and she may have found it, I said. I handed Wolfe a small envelope Saul had given me in the hall. One more item. Caroline had a P.O. box registered under her name in Gramercy, paid 6 months in advance. 2 days ago, it was emptied. The next morning, she left the envelope under our conservatory step. Wolfe examined the envelope carefully. No return, no markings, just the initials, CS again. Inside was a second photograph. This time, it wasn't a greenhouse. It was a small cluttered office. Lanham again, seated behind a desk, typing something into a laptop, and in the background, barely visible through a glass door, stood someone else. Female, blurred, watching him. Wolfe studied it longer than the first one. Not surveillance, he said. Too deliberate, too composed. You think Lanham posed? No, but he was aware. He allowed it. Blackmail material, I asked. No, Wolfe said. A breadcrumb. He wanted someone to find him. But who? Caroline, Wolfe answered. Or perhaps, us. Saul stood. You want me to press further? Yes, Wolfe said. But not at the institute. We risk exposure. Focus on Lanham's former associates, anyone who left the security firm around the time he did, and find out if the woman in this image is known to them. On it, Saul said, and vanished like smoke. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the photo. Archie, he said, you will visit Miss Safford. I raised an eyebrow. Officially, no, she has not asked for a meeting. That does not mean she will refuse one. Approach as concerned, but not suspicious. That's a pretty fine thread to walk. Then walk it carefully. At 2 p.m., I knocked on the door of a limestone walk-up on West 12th, one of those modestly expensive buildings that look like they've never hosted a normal conversation. Caroline answered herself, which was a surprise. She was dressed plainly, slacks, a slate-gray sweater, and no jewelry. Her eyes, though, were the same calm and direct, with just enough chill to make you think twice about lying. Mr. Goodwin, she said, you're not expected. I rarely am, I replied. She stepped aside and let me in. The apartment was neat but lived in. Books, papers, and a coffee mug near the couch. A far cry from her brother's pristine mausoleum of decorum. You've seen the photos, she said. Both. I have. And Lanham's not missing, I said. He's hiding, or being hidden. She nodded. I know. You found him at Greenvale. I saw him, she said, but I didn't speak to him. I wasn't sure he recognized me. Then the lights cut out. An emergency protocol, I guess. When they came back, he was gone. What was he doing there? Typing, recording something. I think he was documenting what was going on inside. And the woman in the second photo, her expression shifted slightly. Just enough. I don't know her, she said. Too fast. Are you sure about that? She hesitated. Then she sat on the edge of a worn armchair and folded her hands. She worked for the institute, admin assistant, maybe more. I saw her once briefly. She was part of the team overseeing chemical transfer permits. And what do you think she's doing now? Protecting someone, Caroline said, or helping Lanham. I don't know which. I stood. You're in deeper than you let on. She looked up at me. So are you. I couldn't argue with that. Back at the brownstone, I relayed everything. Wolfe didn't interrupt. When I finished, he spoke quietly. Miss Safford is not misleading us, he said, but she is omitting. Protecting Lanham, perhaps, or herself. From what? Wolfe's gaze drifted toward the photograph again. From whatever lies beneath those conservatory steps. And what do we do next? We wait. Wait. For what? For the next move. It will come. This game has not finished setting its pieces. And with that, he turned back to his orchids. Outside, the sun dipped behind the city skyline, and in the brownstone, the silence tightened like the pause before a verdict. The crime, whatever it was, hadn't come into focus yet, but the players, they were finally stepping into the frame. The next morning, Wolfe was already 2 steps ahead of me, which, considering he hadn't actually moved, was almost impressive. He'd spent the evening turning over Caroline's evasions, Lanham's reappearance, and the 2 photos, like he was decoding an ancient manuscript. His mind was clearly working like a bread knife on crust, slow, sawing, and eventually decisive. He summoned me to the office at 9 a.m. sharp, a full hour earlier than his usual tolerance for conversation that didn't involve Fritz and coffee. Archie, he said, without preamble, you will find the woman in the second photograph. Good morning to you too. Spare me, I sighed. Any idea who she is? None, but Miss Safford's tone, when referencing her, suggested a familiarity she hoped to conceal. She is key to the next movement in this affair. Wolfe rose, slightly, just enough to cross to his reference shelves, where he retrieved a slim binder labeled Greenvale, Holdings and Logistics. Don't ask me how long he'd had that. It was alphabetized between gastrointestinal patents and gypsum mining frauds, which should tell you everything you need to know about Wolfe's reading habits. She may be listed among the Institute's operational staff, he said. You will start with the administrative chain of command. Anyone involved in logistics or internal transfers. Offer no information about Lanham. Simply express interest in facility security lapses. You'll find that most corporations are remarkably talkative when they believe someone else is to blame, and if they shut the door, find a window, or ring the bell twice. By noon I was standing in the front lobby of the Greenvale Institute's satellite office in Mignolo. It wasn't the greenhouse compound, too sensitive, too insulated. This was the public-facing location, where they gave bland presentations to potential partners and hosted the occasional well-funded grad student looking to boost a resume. The receptionist had a nameplate that said Tanya, but the phone headset she wore like a halo suggested she didn't make conversation unless it involved transferring calls. I gave her my best smile. I'm with an independent oversight group, conducting a quiet audit on personnel turnover at select biotech facilities, I said. Not official, just background research. Would love to talk to someone in internal logistics. She gave me a look usually reserved for toothpaste commercials, clinical and unconvinced. Do you have an appointment?
Not technically, but I do have flexibility and a fondness for transparency that earned me a slight quirk of the mouth. She tapped a few keys, then said, "Miss Niven can see you, room 4. Bingo. Room 4 turned out to be a white-on-white interview box with chairs designed to discourage lingering. Miss Niven entered wearing a sensible suit, wire-frame glasses, and the perpetual expression of someone perpetually 5 minutes late. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "you're conducting an audit of sorts," I said. "We've had a few questions arise around internal records maintenance, particularly involving Greenvale's late shift data entries, meaning personnel with clearance to operate outside standard hours. We've encountered discrepancies in timestamp logs. Any chance you've experienced anomalies in staff routines?" That got a flicker of interest. Not alarm, just curiosity. "There was an internal incident last month," she admitted. "Someone triggered a door sensor at 3:12 a.m. No one was supposed to be on site. No footage recovered. The camera logs had been wiped." "Interesting," I said. "Anyone suspected?" She shook her head. "The matter was passed to our private security contractor. They found no evidence of forced entry, and the story vanished." I leaned in. "And was there a woman on staff who oversaw that investigation?" "Short, dark hair, late 30s, often stationed near the upper greenhouse offices." Miss Niven blinked. Then to my surprise, she nodded. "Martine Keller," she said. "She worked in chemical inventory. Left 3 weeks ago. No notice. Just sent an email saying she was taking leave, and never returned." "Did she resign?" "No. Technically she's still listed as active, but with no return date, and no one to report to." That sounded like a vanishing act. "Can you give me a contact number?" "We don't have one," she said, cautiously. "It was scrubbed from our system." Compliance marked her file restricted. "That only happens when legal's involved." That gave me pause. Legal. Would anyone at the company have had a reason to initiate a quiet removal? Something sensitive? Niven hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. "There was talk about data leaks. Someone pulling files that weren't tied to active studies. Speculation. I wasn't involved." I gave her my card. "If anything else comes to mind, especially about Keller, call me." Outside the sun was too bright and the wind too cold. I found a bench and called Wolfe. "She's real," I said. "Martine Keller, chemical inventory. Left without warning. Company closed ranks." Keller, Wolfe repeated. "A Swiss surname, possibly Alsatian." "We're not planning a genealogy," I said. "She's gone dark." "Yes, which makes her either dangerous or frightened." I filled him in on the security anomaly, the erased logs, the missing footage, the vanishing woman. Wolfe let out a long breath that meant his gears had turned another notch. "She may have witnessed something, or participated." "What's our play?" "Return home," he said. "There is more to come." When I got back to the brownstone, Fritz had dinner already in the works. Veal medallions with sage and lemon. Wolfe was in his chair, a small stack of printouts next to him. I sat, poured myself a beer, and waited. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Wolfe looked at me, expecting anyone. "No." I opened the door. It was a courier. No logo, just a man in a plain blue cap, and a padded envelope, with Wolfe's name on it. "From Miss C," the man said. Then he turned and walked off. I brought the envelope to Wolfe, who opened it slowly. Inside was a USB drive, and a single slip of paper. It read, "She's running. They're following." This is what she gave me. I don't know how long I can keep up appearances. CS. I inserted the drive into Wolfe's secured laptop, and opened the lone file. It was a video, grainy, time-stamped, and 21 seconds long. Lanham, Martine Keller, and someone else. A man face partially obscured, arguing, gesturing at a console. Lanham pointing. Keller is watching. Then abrupt cut. Wolfe leaned forward, studying each frame, as if it were a confession.
This, he said quietly, is no longer about oversight or ethics. This is a cover-up, and now Miss Keller's silence is the hinge on which it all swings. I didn't reply, because when Wolfe speaks like that, you don't interrupt. You listen, and then you get ready, because something's about to move. There's a particular stillness in the brownstone when a case tips from intriguing to dangerous. It's not a silence exactly, more like a dense pause. Fritz still clangs in the kitchen. The radiator still hisses its disapproval of New York winter, but Wolfe stops pretending he's interested in anything else. The orchids are left to fend for themselves. His beer is drunk colder, quicker, and his voice, when it does come, sharpens like a scalpel. That night, after watching the grainy video 3 more times, Wolfe didn't speak for 15 minutes. That's a long stretch of nothing, even for him. I let the silence hold. Then finally, he tapped the arm of his chair. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "You will not sleep tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't be the first time. You will go to the Green Vale compound, the actual facility, not the satellite office. Use discretion. I want to know if anyone matching Martine Keller's description has been seen in the last 72 hours. You may say you're looking for her on behalf of her family, if necessary. You think she's still there? No, but someone may know where she went, and more importantly, who helped her leave." I nodded. "And if they don't want to talk, ask anyway, kindly. And if that fails, kindness, then subtle menace. In that order." I left just before 10. The Green Vale compound was out on the edge of Long Island's industrial sprawl, wedged between a logistics park and a row of hydroponic farms that lit up like Martian domes after dark. The entrance was guarded by a keypad, 2 security cameras, and a tired-looking man in a security windbreaker who barely glanced up from his tablet. "Evening," I said. "You the night supervisor?" He frowned. "Depends who's asking." "Archie Goodwin. I'm looking for someone, not officially. Family matter." He eyed me, skeptical. "You a cop?" "Not even close." I took out a photo I'd printed from the video. Martine Keller in profile, blurred but clear enough to show the cheekbones and the distinct jawline. "I need to know if she's been seen here in the past 3 days. He looked at the image, then back at me. "She's not on shift." "She's not on any shift," I said. "She left without giving notice." He grunted. "Heard about that. A few folks said she'd been acting nervous, jumping at shadows. Then she vanished. Word is she cleared out her locker but left her badge behind." "That was curious." "Who told you that?" "Alvarez. He's on maintenance. He said he saw her coming out of the main data archive last week, after hours." "You have cameras?" He snorted. "We do, but the archive wing's been on a different system. Got hit by a power fluctuation last month. Never really fixed. Admin didn't prioritize it." I kept my face steady. "Did anyone else go in there?" "Yeah, Dr. Madsen, facility head. He was in a few hours before she went in. Think he saw her?" "If he did." He didn't say. "Mind giving me a name for your Alvarez?" "Luis Alvarez. Works swing shift. Next in at 6 a.m. I gave him my number and a cash tip for good memory. "If you think of anything else, call me." Back at the brownstone, it was just past midnight. Wolfe was still up, seated with a small glass of pear brandy, and that look that says his mental chessboard had just gained a new piece. I filled him in on what I'd learned. When I mentioned Dr. Madsen, his expression didn't change, but the way he set his glass down did. "Madsen," he said. "I recall the name from an early Green Vale grant. He was one of the signatories on the compliance report. That report omitted several clauses that were, according to Caroline Safford's early letters, inserted after board review. In other words," I said, "he doctored it, or permitted it to be doctored. Same sin." I sat. "You think Keller saw something in that archive?" "Yes. Or she found something, and someone wanted to make sure it disappeared with her. Then why leave the video?" Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Because Lanham didn't agree with the plan. You think he's trying to protect her? Or use her? The phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin. This is Caroline. Her voice was low. We need to meet. I don't want to speak over the phone. When? Now. I hesitated. Your place? No. There's a diner on East 22nd and 2nd. Back booth. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I turned to Wolfe. Caroline wants to meet. Now. Go. 25 minutes later, I was sitting in a cracked leather booth, under a flickering pendant light, while Caroline stirred her coffee like it held secrets. She looked worn, not fragile. She was never that, but tired in a way that suggested sleep had been optional lately. I got a call, she said. Blocked number. Voice I didn't recognize. A man. He said Keller was gone, that she'd gone underground, and that I needed to stop asking questions. Did he threaten you? No. He warned me, said you got what you wanted. Leave the rest buried. Sounds like Lanham's crew, or someone pretending to be, she said. Either way, he was right about one thing. She's gone. I tried contacting a friend of hers, someone at a co-op in Astoria. They said she left a bag, a note, and vanished. Did the note say where she was going? No, just that she couldn't risk staying, and that if anything happened to her, Victor would know. Back at the brownstone, I relayed everything. Wolfe listened, motionless. This is an unraveling, he said. Not a plan. What do? We let it fall. Wolfe nodded. Keller was the hinge. Now that she's gone, they'll panic. Someone will act rashly, and that will be our opening. And if they don't, he looked up at me, calm as ever. They will, because secrets don't like silence. They need to be spoken, or destroyed. I turned off the light as Wolfe leaned back into the dark. In the quiet that followed, I thought about Caroline's tired eyes, about Keller's retreat into shadow, about Victor Lanham, still somewhere in the chess game, waiting for the board to tilt. And I realized Wolfe was right. The game wasn't about to end. It was about to erupt. By Friday morning, the brownstone was quiet in the way only a ticking clock can be loud. Wolfe was up before the eggs had cooled, which meant something in his mind had budged during the night. He didn't say anything as Fritz delivered breakfast. Poached eggs, toasted sourdough, and black coffee strong enough to polish a doorknob. But he didn't need to. I've seen him think in 5 languages. This morning, he was thinking in subtraction. We were missing something. Archie, he said. Finally. Yes, sir. We need to find out who else knew about the video. I nodded. Aside from Keller, Lanham and Caroline. Yes, someone else was present, or made aware. That footage was too deliberate, too intact. It was saved to be used, either as leverage, or as a fail-safe. Meaning Keller and Lanham planned to use it only if things went wrong. Now Keller is gone, and the video is here. Lanham sent it, or Caroline extracted it. Either way, the implication is that someone at the Institute posed a danger, a personal one, not corporate. Threats, not lawsuits. Precisely. Just then the phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin. A pause. Then you need to stop. The voice was disguised, modulated, mechanical. Excuse me, you're pushing into something you don't understand. People are going to get hurt. I leaned against the wall. Funny, they already have. You don't know the full picture. We're working on it. The voice paused again. Stay away from Greenvale. That's the last warning. The line went dead. I looked at Wolfe. They're nervous. He nodded once. Then we apply pressure. That afternoon I made my second visit to Greenvale, but this time I didn't use the front entrance. I parked 2 blocks away, used a side gate Alvarez had mentioned, and followed a maintenance path that led around the east wing of the facility. The greenhouse roofs gleamed in the winter light, fogged from within. Everything looked normal, too normal. I found Alvarez near the back loading bay. He was younger than I'd expected, wiry, with sharp features, and an energy that said he didn't like wasting time. Are you looking for Keller? He asked. I nodded. You saw her last, right? A week ago. She was panicked, said something about files going missing, wanted to know if the power logs could be erased manually. What did you tell her? That I wouldn't know how. Did she mention Lanham? Alvarez tensed. No, but someone else asked about him. Who? He hesitated. Then Madsen. That got my full attention. He was circling, asking what Keller was doing late nights, whether she spoke to anyone. He said she was jeopardizing containment. I thought he meant biohazards, but now, I'm not sure. I handed him my card again. If Madsen says anything more, you call me. He nodded. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened, his expression still as granite. Containment, he said softly. That word again. He leaned forward. Archie, we will not wait anymore. You want to pull them in? Yes. Madsen, Brewster and Clifton Safford. All three. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. I want them in this office. No assistants, no intermediaries. They will answer. I gave him a long look. You're planning the gathering. He nodded. The pressure must not only be felt, it must be seen. Saturday evening arrived cold and grey. Fritz had cleared the dining room to accommodate Wolfe's idea of a confrontation. No food, no warmth, no pleasantries, just chairs in a circle, coffee available by request, and Wolfe's presence filling the room like a verdict. At 6:58, Madsen arrived first. He was older than I expected, broad-shouldered with thinning hair, and a physician's wary calm. He wore a heavy grey coat, and carried no briefcase. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. You requested my presence, he said to me. Wolfe did, I said. Come in. At 7:03, Clifton Safford showed up looking half unwilling, half prepared. He gave Madsen a glance, cool and tight, but didn't speak. At 7:08, Brewster rang the bell. Wolfe didn't flinch at the tardiness, but I could tell he noted it. Once they were all seated, Wolfe began without standing. You are here because you have all participated, directly or indirectly, in the suppression of information involving the Green Veil Institute. This suppression has placed one woman in hiding, and endangered others. We are now going to determine who did what, and why. Brewster leaned forward. Mr. Wolfe, do not, Wolfe said, interrupt me again. Brewster leaned back. Wolfe turned to Madsen. Doctor, when did you last see Martine Keller? Madsen hesitated. About a week ago. She asked for a security override. She claimed she needed access to the chemical vault. Did you approve it? No. I said I'd get back to her, but I didn't. Why not? She made me uneasy. She was frightened but focused, like she had a plan. I didn't want to be part of it. Wolfe shifted his gaze to Safford. Mr. Safford, were you aware your subsidiary companies were involved in unlicensed compound transfers? Safford blinked. Excuse me, you've seen the report. The one Keller tried to compile. You know the numbers didn't match the supply logs. That's irrelevant. It is not, Wolfe said, because Keller shared that report with Lanham, who, we now know, made a copy, and sent it to someone else. Brewster frowned. To whom? To us, Wolfe said. I watched the shift in their faces. First surprise, then something else. Calculation. Wolfe continued. Keller was preparing to go public. Lanham was to facilitate it. But someone intercepted them, and now she's missing. That is not a coincidence. That is orchestration. Madsen's voice was quiet. You're implying murder. No, Wolfe said. Not yet. I am implying intent. Malicious, coordinated intent to suppress what would have exposed illegal chemical trials conducted under the guise of agricultural experiments. You can't prove that, Brewster said. I don't need to, Wolfe replied. I only need to ask the right question. He turned to Madsen again. Who gave you the order to monitor Keller? Madsen said nothing. Was it Mr. Safford? A long pause. Then Madsen whispered, yes. Safford's face turned to stone. That's a lie. No, Wolfe said. It is a confession, and a necessary one. He looked to Brewster. You will take this to your board. You will recommend a full audit. If you do not, The press will receive everything we've compiled. I will make sure of it." Brewster looked like he'd swallowed a spoon. "And Safford?" he asked. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "He will do what he always does. Retreat behind silence." Silence followed. Then Brewster nodded once. They filed out, one by one. When the door finally clicked shut, Wolfe let out a breath. "It's begun," he said. "What has?" "The unraveling." And this time I believed him, because silence wasn't just broken, it was fractured. Sunday morning came in quiet, like it had decided to wait and see if the city deserved noise. In the brownstone, Fritz made a modest breakfast, oatmeal with fruit, rye toast, and soft-boiled eggs, but Wolfe barely acknowledged it. He was in his chair, untouched cup of coffee steaming faintly, eyes closed not with rest, but calculation. The night before had cracked the case like a pane of glass, cleanly but with lines running in all directions. Madsen had confessed under pressure. Safford had denied everything, but with less of his usual polish. And Brewster, whatever his complicity, had nodded like a man who'd just glimpsed the edge of a cliff under his own feet. I sipped my coffee and waited for Wolfe to start the post-mortem. He didn't, not right away. Instead he opened his eyes, reached for the small lacquered notebook he kept for particularly convoluted cases, and began flipping pages with deliberate care. "Archie," he said, without looking up, "you will call Miss Safford." "Caroline, of course. She deserves the update. She deserves information," Wolfe said, "but not satisfaction. Not yet." I called her at her apartment, and she answered on the first ring. No small talk, no pleasantries. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked. "Wolfe did," I said. "Enough to make the next move." There was a pause. "What happens to Clifton?" I hesitated. "That depends on what he does next. But I'd be ready for fallout if I were you." Her voice dropped a notch. "He never used to lie well, but he lies quickly now. You knew he was involved." I knew he had knowledge. What I didn't know was whether he'd act on it, or let someone else take the risk. "Well, he acted, quietly, with Madsen. We have the proof." "I see." There was a silence I didn't interrupt. Caroline Safford didn't need comfort, but she was trying to decide what the new version of her brother looked like. "Tell Mr. Wolfe," she said finally. "I'd like to speak to him." I passed that along. Wolfe didn't blink. "She may speak to me," he said, "after she answers one question, which is, why she waited until Keller vanished, before bringing the evidence to us." That afternoon, Saul Panzer arrived with his usual economy of words, and an envelope thick with background. He handed it to Wolfe, and poured himself a coffee, black, no sugar. "Confirmed your guess," he said. "The woman in the video, Martine Keller, contacted a digital archivist 2 weeks before she disappeared, sent him fragments of logs, and requested off-site storage." Wolfe glanced up. "Did she identify herself?" "No, she used a pseudonym, but the metadata matches the test servers at Greenvale, and the archivist wiped everything yesterday morning, claimed he was compelled to cooperate." Wolfe's jaw set. "Lanham, most likely, or someone speaking for him. Either way," Wolfe murmured, "we've lost the trace." "Not completely," Saul said. "The archivist saved a partial index. One file was marked VX234, delivery interruption. It was accessed by a user tagged SFF_CL1 3 days before the wipe." VX234, Wolfe repeated. "That was the trial compound Keller oversaw." He turned to me. "Call Brewster. Request the delivery logs for that compound. Do not mention Keller or Lanham. Frame it as a logistical audit." I called. Brewster answered on the second ring, breath short. "I'm in a meeting." "You're on the line with Wolfe," I said, "and he wants the delivery logs for compound VX234. A pause. "Then that's very specific. And very urgent. I'll send them within the hour." He did. Wolfe read the printout with narrowed eyes. He murmured aloud as he skimmed,
delivery scheduled, shipment logged, but no confirmation of reception. And there, reassignment to alternate trial group. No identifier attached. He looked up at me. They diverted it. Diverted it. Where? That Wolfe said. We will now discover. He called Saul back into the office and issued the next instructions. Trace all logistics partners affiliated with Safford Secondary Holdings. Focus on those with refrigerated transit capability and no documented public contracts. Saul nodded. You're looking for a phantom lab? Yes, Wolfe said. A site used to hide a test that couldn't withstand oversight. And you think Lanham was trying to expose it? I think he tried and failed. Now he's protecting what's left. That evening, Wolfe finally called Caroline back. She arrived just after dark, wearing the same grey coat as before but looking older. Not aged, just weighed down. She sat in the red chair, without waiting to be invited, and folded her hands in her lap. I know I waited too long, she said. Wolfe did not respond. I didn't want to believe he was capable of it. But when I saw the first photo, I knew. Wolfe tapped the arm of his chair. You knew earlier. She flinched, just barely. Yes. Then why delay? Because I thought it would burn out on its own. That whatever experiment they were hiding would collapse or be shelved. But it didn't. No, it grew. And now? Wolfe asked. She met his gaze. Now I want it ended. Wolfe nodded. That is my intent. Caroline stood. If you need a public statement, I'm ready to make one. Wolfe gave her the barest of nods. After she left, he turned to me. Tomorrow, he said, we bring them back. The suspects? No, the players. You're calling a full gathering. Yes, here, Brewster, Safford, Madsen, and if we can find him, Lanham. You think he'll come? I think he already has. I blinked. He's been here. No, Wolfe said. But he's listening, and when I open the right door, he'll step through it. That night, the brownstone felt more like a theater than a home. The chairs were in place, the lights were low, the players had their roles, and Wolfe was ready to lift the curtain, because whatever lay beneath the conservatory steps, it was no longer just hidden, it was waiting to be named. Monday evening came in low and grey, pressing against the city like a warning. Inside the brownstone, everything was arranged, precisely, methodically. Wolfe's office had been reconfigured with 4 chairs facing his desk, 1 fewer than the usual 6. That, Wolfe said, was intentional. We shall not invite ghosts, he murmured. Only the living ones pretending they are not. At 6:45, Fritz brought in the coffee service. Wolfe allowed a small plate of canapés, not because he expected them to be eaten, but because civility, like justice, requires appearances. I stood by the bookshelves, notebook in hand, ready to log the proceedings, though with Wolfe, what was said often mattered less than how it was responded to. At 6:58, the bell rang. I opened the door to find Clifton Safford, rigid in a charcoal overcoat, lips tight. He said nothing, walked past me like I was the coat rack, and took his seat without being told. 3 minutes later, Dr. Madsen arrived. This time, he carried a small leather folio, likely prepared for excuses Wolfe wouldn't be accepting. He greeted no one, just sat beside Safford, jaw clenched, fingers folded over the case, like a man guarding a last defense. Brewster was last, 7:05, which was late, yes, but he entered with the look of someone who believed 5 minutes was a power move. Wolfe didn't even glance at the clock. He simply motioned for the final seat. Once they were all seated, Wolfe cleared his throat and began. You are here, he said, because something was buried beneath the conservatory steps of a corporate greenhouse, and for a time, it stayed there. He leaned forward slightly. But no deception, however rooted, remains untouched forever. Eventually, even the most careful planting disturbs the soil. He gestured toward the small monitor on his desk. I turned it on. The video appeared, grainy, clipped, and time-stamped. Lanham, Keller, the blurred figure behind the glass. All three men watched. No one spoke. When it ended, Wolfe turned his gaze to Safford. That footage, Wolfe said, was extracted from the secure drive Keller encrypted before her disappearance. It was delivered to my doorstep by your sister. Safford's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Keller, as you well know, attempted to document a pattern of undocumented chemical trials, compound VX234, reclassified under alternate terminologies. She recorded unauthorized shifts in compound custody, and a series of falsified logs prepared to redirect attention away from the second, unnamed facility. Wolfe nodded toward Brewster. That second facility, as Mr. Brewster has now confirmed, was leased under a logistics firm, owned in trust by the Citadel Foundation's investment branch. Its purpose, gentlemen, was to conduct the trials no public ethics board would approve. Madsen's voice cracked the air. That's speculation. No, Wolfe said. It is accounting. Saul Panzer traced the shell leases, the freight records, and the driver identifications. All of it traces back to your approval signatures. Madsen's hand tightened around his folio. I was told the compounds were agricultural. You were told, Wolfe said, what you wanted to believe. Keller, however, was not content with illusion. She discovered that at least one of the test compounds had been adapted from the nerve inhibition formula, initially developed for military application. That got a reaction. Even Brewster flinched. You'll find, Wolfe continued, that Lanham began asking questions when those documents crossed his desk. He was flagged, removed, and reassigned under a false security pretense, but not silenced. He found Keller. She provided him with evidence, and he tried, foolishly, to go public. Wolfe let the silence spread. Someone stopped him, he said softly, and tried to stop her. Now Brewster leaned forward. We didn't know the full extent. Of course you didn't, Wolfe snapped, because you allowed yourself not to. You hid behind compartmentalization, while a woman was erased. Wolfe turned to Safford. You ordered Madsen to observe her. Safford opened his mouth, then shut it again. Yes, Wolfe said. We heard it from Madsen himself, but you didn't act alone. The call Caroline received, the voice warning her off, was traced through an anonymized relay to a burner account linked to your foundation's media consultant. Brewster looked sideways at Safford. You orchestrated this, he said. No, Safford replied, voice quiet but sharp. I tried to protect it. You have no idea how close this came to success. Wolfe didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. Success, he repeated. Would that have been Keller's permanent silence, or Lanham's body in a ditch? I don't know where Lanham is, Safford said. You don't need to, Wolfe replied, because he's already spoken. He reached into the desk and pulled out a second envelope. Inside, a small recording device. I pressed play. Lanham's voice, worn and flat, filled the room. If this reaches anyone, Martine didn't run. She was chased. She tried to stop what was happening. I told her not to go alone, but she did. The files are real. The trials are real. The trials are real. And if she disappears, it's because the people who smiled in the boardroom wouldn't let her leave. The recording ended. No one moved. I will not turn this over to the police, Wolfe said. Yet, Brewster raised a brow. Yet, I am giving you, Wolfe said, the opportunity to correct the record, launch a full internal investigation, alert the board, cooperate with the media, and make the name Martine Keller the one remembered, for her bravery, not for her disappearance. And if we don't, Safford asked. Wolfe looked at him, with a stillness that could break stone. Then I will. They left one by one, more quietly than they had arrived. When the door shut behind the last of them, Wolfe leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Fritz appeared with a fresh coffee, placing it without a word. I stood by the desk, arms folded, watching Wolfe's chest rise and fall slowly. like a man re-entering his natural habitat.
You think they'll do it? I asked. No, Wolfe said, but they will pretend to, and that buys us time. To do what? To find Keller, or what's left of her, and Victor Lanham. They're the final knots. I nodded. Outside, the cold wind slid down 35th Street like a whisper. Inside, the brownstone stood firm. The pieces were nearly in place, and the truth was coming home. The next 48 hours came and went like a metronome in a storm, steady in the brownstone, chaotic beyond it. While Wolfe didn't budge from his chair or even his reading schedule, Barzun at breakfast, Pliny at tea, the world beyond his walls began to shudder. Brewster's board announced a compliance review initiative. Safford issued a polished, hollow press statement about deep concern for procedural transparency. And somewhere out in the smoke and mirrors, Victor Lanham was still missing. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded. Late Wednesday morning, I came into the office to find Wolfe staring out the window, an act that for him carried the weight of a 4-hour hike. He's going to surface, he said, still looking out at 35th Street. He must. You think Lanham will come to us? Wolfe nodded. He has no other sanctuary. What if he's been taken out of the game entirely? Wolfe's lips thinned. He is not dead. I waited because there was more coming. He left too much. Breadcrumbs. Keller's warning, the video, the files. He's leading us, deliberately. To what? To the one thing none of them have admitted. I sat across from him. What's that? That someone else was helping him. I raised an eyebrow. Aside from Keller, yes, she was the heart of the operation. But there was another hand. Someone embedded. I opened my notebook. You thinking someone inside Green Vale? Not necessarily. Someone near the logistics operation. Someone who knew the delivery schedules. I was about to ask more when the phone rang. Fritz answered, then poked his head in. A call. Line 1. No name given. I picked it up. Goodwin. A voice I recognized immediately. Soft, dry, deliberate. This is Victor. I straightened in the chair. Where are you? That doesn't matter. What matters is what comes next. Wolfe's here. I know. That's why I called. I need to see him. When? Tonight. After dark. But not there. Too many eyes on the brownstone now. Wolfe was already watching me. Tell him to come, he said. I relayed it. No, Lanham said. Not there. There's a greenhouse off Canal Street. Private. Haven't been used in years. Meet me there. 9 o'clock. Then he hung up. Wolfe frowned. You're not going alone. I didn't plan to. No, Archie. You're not going at all. That caught me short. What? I will go. You. Wolfe rose not quickly. Not with drama, but with the gravity of a ship turning in harbor. This is the end game, and if Lanham has come out of hiding, then I must meet him myself. I don't like it. You're not meant to. We made arrangements quickly. Saul would drive. Fritz packed a thermos and Wolfe's coat. At 8:30 we were outside. Wolfe stepping carefully but determinedly down the front steps, like a man heading to court. Saul helped him into the car. I stayed behind, monitoring the house. Wolfe had insisted, if something went wrong, he wanted the brownstone intact. That's how serious it had gotten. At 9:12 p.m., the call came in. Wolfe's voice cool and measured. We have him. You've seen Lanham. Yes. Is he safe? For the moment. What's he told you? A great deal. Prepare yourself. We will return shortly. They came back just before 10. Wolfe moved slower, heavier. His coat was damp from the mist, his eyes glassy with fatigue. Saul helped him to his chair. Fritz brought a blanket. Wolfe looked at me. Record, he said. I opened the notebook. Victor Lanham confirmed that Keller was not abducted. She fled after receiving direct threats, not from Safford, nor Madsen, but from someone she trusted. Someone inside the logistics arm. Yes, a handler named Greg Tolliver, employed under one of Safford's shells. His job was to oversee discreet cargo transfers. He approached Keller under the guise of a security review and warned her to drop the report. When she refused, he sabotaged her email access and altered her badge credentials. I nodded. So how did she get away? Lanham helped. He created a false medical leave request, routed it through a dormant HR channel, and secured her a temporary safe house in New Jersey. She's still there. I stared at him. Alive? Yes. I felt a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding release from my chest. That's something. She won't come forward, Wolfe added. Not yet. She's terrified. But she gave Lanham something else. He pulled a small USB drive from his coat pocket. The complete chemical trial log. Every unauthorized transfer, every altered entry, with timestamps and signatures. He handed it to me. Saul will deliver this to the authorities tomorrow. Quietly. What about Tolliver? Gone. Fled 2 nights ago. Likely tipped off. But we have his name. And his connection to Safford's logistics firm. I leaned back in the chair. That ties it all up. No, Wolfe said. It opens it. I looked at him. Because Tolliver, Wolfe continued, wasn't just hiding chemical records. He was trafficking samples. I blinked. Samples, yes. Experimental compounds with neurological effects. One of them has military classification. VX-234 wasn't an agricultural product. It was a misdirection, and they planned to sell it. They already tried. The office was quiet for a long moment. Then Wolfe spoke again, softer. That, he said, is what the silence concealed. Not just fraud, not just a cover-up, but the deliberate attempt to weaponize research under the veil of scientific advancement. And Safford, he knew, not all of it, but enough. Do we go to the press? Not yet, Wolfe said. Let the report reach the regulators first, then the truth may stand on its own. Fritz appeared with warm brandy. Wolfe accepted it, and finally leaned back. It is finished, he said. I looked around at the quiet room, at the photos on the desk, at the empty space where fear had lived. Not finished, I said, just turned. Wolfe raised his glass in a faint salute, then let it turn, toward daylight. That night, as I locked up and turned out the lights, I couldn't help thinking about the conservatory, about the soil and what it hides, and how sometimes the roots run deeper than you think. Thursday arrived in one of those fragile early spring mornings New York sometimes slips into between bouts of frost, the kind where the sun forgets itself for an hour or two and reminds the city it still knows how to shine. In the brownstone it felt more like a reprieve than a resolution. Wolfe was at his desk earlier than usual, which in his world meant just after 9. He was reading the morning newspapers, which now carried the first ripples of what he'd unspooled over the last 7 days. No names, no indictments yet, but words like unethical trials, regulatory inquiry, and whistleblower report were making the rounds. As far as the public was concerned, the scandal hadn't erupted. It had merely started to smoke. I came in with a fresh pot of coffee, and he nodded toward the stack of papers without looking up. They are circling, he said. Reporters, yes, like jackals with notepads, but it will take time. The regulators will want sealed testimony. Legal will attempt delay. But Caroline Safford has already spoken to 2 journalists. I poured him a cup and took my seat. She's not pulling back. No, she's making good on her word. That's a surprise. No, Wolfe said. It is not. He set the paper aside and looked at me. There is one matter remaining. I knew the tone. It wasn't a question. It was a thread. Lanham, I guessed. Yes, he's left the city. Did he say where? No, but he left a letter. It arrived this morning. He handed me a thick cream envelope. Inside a single page in tight, careful handwriting. Mr. Wolfe, thank you for believing me. I am not innocent in all of this. I enabled much of it for too long, but I have done what I can to correct it. Martine is safe. I will stay in motion, but if needed, I will testify. Tell Archie I appreciated his patience. Tell Miss Safford she was right to stop trusting me. And tell the city, nothing. Let the truth grow quietly. It will bloom. VLI read it twice, then handed it back. Wolfe didn't reread it. He will not be found, he said. No, he doesn't want to be. Then what about Keller? She will resurface. In time, when the danger subsides, and if it doesn't, she will remain what she has become, a shadow in the story. There was a long pause as we both stared at the fireplace, cold and unlit, but somehow still commanding attention. Do you think Safford will face charges? I asked. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. He will face something worse. Disgrace without absolution. Not jail. Not likely. He has enough legal insulation to stall a convoy of prosecutors, but his reputation is finished. The board will sideline him quietly. A resignation will be negotiated. The Citadel Foundation will find a new name. That's it. That is society's version of justice. Subtle, insufficient, but not meaningless. And Madsen, he will retreat. He was a pawn who convinced himself he was a bishop. Then what was Lanham? Wolfe thought a moment. A rook, he said finally. Rigid, straight-moving, and dangerous when overlooked. I leaned back. You really do see it as chess, don't you? No, Wolfe said. Chess is fair. Fritz entered the room then, hands folded, waiting for Wolfe's nod. When he received it, he said, "Lunch is prepared." We rose and made our way to the dining room. The menu was light today. Spring greens with lemon vinaigrette, grilled trout, and a white bean puree. Wolfe claimed paired well with solitude. He ate slowly, contemplatively, in near silence. Halfway through, he looked at me. Do you regret not chasing Lanham? I shook my head. He was never ours to catch. Correct. And Miss Keller, she doesn't owe us anything. She got out alive. That's enough. Wolfe nodded and returned to his plate. After lunch I took the afternoon hours to file the last of my notes, tighten up the case record, and write my final report for Wolfe's archives. That's one of those parts of the job most people don't think about. Detective work doesn't end with the big reveal. It ends with paperwork. Wolfe insists every case be documented down to the last quote and eyebrow twitch. For posterity, he says. I think it's to help him relive the part where he was right. Just before 5, the doorbell rang. Fritz answered, and returned with a white box and a small envelope addressed in slanted script. To Mr. Wolfe and Mr. Goodwin, C.S. Inside the box was a single white orchid, its petals tipped with a faint trace of lavender. There was no note. There didn't need to be. Wolfe placed it on the windowsill, and said nothing. That evening, dinner was served at the usual hour. Braised duck, wild rice, roasted pear. Wolfe at last had returned to his culinary rituals. No interruptions, no tension, just the smells of comfort, and the quiet unraveling of a week that had shaken the stillest man I know. Afterward, we returned to the office. Wolfe opened a new bottle of Burgundy. I poured myself a finger of rye, and sat back in the chair opposite him. You know, I said, this whole thing started because someone tampered with a few storage records and a badge access system. No, Wolfe said. It started because someone tried to pretend their ambition was science. He raised his glass. And because someone else refused to let the truth rot under their feet. Here's to Roots then, I said. He gave the smallest of nods. To Roots, he agreed. The fire crackled faintly. The brownstone, for all its age and discipline, felt like it had taken a breath and exhaled. Outside, the city groaned on. Inside, the chairs were returned to their rightful places, the folders closed, and the silence finally meant peace again. We sat there, Wolfe and I, not speaking for a while, until he broke it, as he always does when he's finally satisfied. People, he said, are rarely what they cultivate, and I, as I always do, gave it a beat, then added the punctuation.
but they do love to water their lies." That made him snort softly. Another case closed, another secret unearthed, another night in the brownstone. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no better place for the truth to bloom.